All right, team, we're after 6. Good evening. I'd like to call the February 8th special assembly meeting. Please stand for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
See, Mr. Pike.
Here.
Mr. Yescad.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Ms. Carlson.
Here.
And Mr. Celine.
Here.
Mayor Eisenbeis and Mr. Mosier are absent this evening.
Thank you. Are there any, so we're on correspondence and agenda changes. Are there any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on. To persons to be heard. We are now at persons to be heard for public participation on any item off the agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes per individual. Is there any public comment for items off the agenda? Seeing none. New business. We are now at item A, preliminary discussion direction for the FY 2025 municipal budget with focus on the general fund and internal service funds. John and Melissa.
Thank you. Here we go. This is the first one. The way we've done this in the past, we get a fairly firm commitment from the Assembly on what the level of school funding is going to look like, and we had that a few weeks ago. And now we're going to come forward with a presentation from Melissa that really summarizes what we've put together for some decision points for the Assembly using our strategic plan and the guidance we got there, and offered up some proposals. We call them RPs, resource proposals, and those proposals tie to specific actions in the strategic plan. We'll put those up for, we don't necessarily need firm decisions, but just guidance on things that need to stay, things that need to go, and then we'll build that into the draft general fund budget that we plan on presenting to you all by the end of this month. And when that draft general fund is presented, from that point on, any changes would have to be motions made. But tonight we'll be looking for that general guidance on the things that we're about to present. So with that, Melissa, please.
And our goal is generally we want to present the budget that best reflects the will of the body. And I think the better we start out, the more smoothly the whole process goes. So that's where we are tonight, is getting that initial feedback on what the staff has recommended looking into 2025 and getting the Assembly feedback. So I wanted to start out because we've been doing this for the past few years, and we've had a number of new and in some cases kind of big ticket items that have come before this body. And so I wanted to start out by highlighting some of the things that we've brought before you that are in the works, that are a success. I think one of our first ones, which really is driving this whole process, is the strategic plan. In 2022, we were able to put our first ever strategic plan in place, and it's really been helpful to help us guide and keep us directed in what we're doing. We also have a new Parks and Recreation program that is up and running. It's been just barely over a year since it started, and we've already had 643 people. And these numbers are at least, our system was kind of slow to get started. And so this is just tracking in our electronic system, but 643 users have signed up for programs. There have been over 100 programs offered, and there have been at least 803 reservations for different school facilities. We added the sustainability coordinator, which has been filled by Bree Gable. And this has really helped our team. It's playing a key role in the Sustainability Commission. And she has also been leading applying for funding. So she's applied for $8.9 million. We've gotten 2 million of that. A lot of that is still kind of, we're waiting for feedback. And then she's been leading initiatives like the ETIP and C2C, which we would not otherwise have resources to be using. And then another big goal of the past couple of years has been, we've known this federal funding is coming. So focusing on getting some of that federal funding and being prepared to actually manage and use that funding. So I put together a little spreadsheet of funds that we've either already been awarded or we have a pretty good idea. Things like the seaplane base, we don't have an award in hand yet, but we know it's coming. That number is over $78 million. So that's a lot of funding coming into Sitka. So in terms of our budget process, this is the internal kind of process for our staff. So our staff, we had a kickoff meeting October 16th, and staff have been working on their budgets and putting together the resource proposals that are here today. Since then, we have a number of steps, different steps depending on the type of fund. We're looking at rates, updating our fiscal models. Our budget is still zero based, so we kind of wipe out the prior year budget and everyone starts fresh. We're focusing on risk scoring capital projects, and then any new change that's particularly a change in the level of service that we've provided requires a resource proposal, and those proposals are submitted, reviewed by an internal team, and then that's what comes to you today. Everything has to tie to the strategic goal or to a strategic goal, hopefully in action. And if they don't get considered. And everyone did a great job this year filling them out, tying them to their goals. I think if you read them, there's a lot of strong justifications for why the resource is needed. We are also doing RPs for capital projects as well. You will notice that in this budget, we're lighter on capital projects than we have been in recent years. And that's really because we're focusing on some smaller projects that are going to really kind of make sure that the existing infrastructure we have is maintained. And we also have a ton of funding already set aside for capital. So even if we were to set aside funding this year, we wouldn't be spending it.
Can I ask you a question? So just a process question. Do you want questions as you go along, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'd love to have questions as we go.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Thanks.
So yes, this is, and again, our goal today is we just want to get feedback on all of these things that are being presented and decide, do they go in or out?
I guess something I've had a question about, and then it's kind of talked about in the slide, was zero based. So I know some of our funds probably aren't using all of their budget. What happens to that remainder?
So that is at the end of the year when we have a surplus, if it's in the general fund, that is going to be part of the consideration for what goes into the public infrastructure sinking fund. If it's, for example, electric, that is just going to go into working capital. That's going to kind of, reset our starting point. So when we're looking at our fiscal model, we know, well, if they'd spent this down, maybe they'd have $1 million less in working capital at the beginning of the year. We know there's maybe $1 million more. So it all goes into that calculation.
Before you move on, Melissa, I do want to add one thing to this budget process slide. as we've gone year to year, we had the 2020, I think it was the FY20 when COVID kicked
Yeah.
off 2 weeks after I got here, and that was everybody, no matter what it is, cut 10% off the top. We need to get ready for this thing. 2021 was kind of delay capital because we aren't sure what's going to happen. 22, 23, and 24, we focused very, very, very capital heavy, and to get our projects moving again. This year, my focus has been the human capital side and getting the resources we need to get those projects going. Because as you saw on the previous slide, $78.4 million worth of federal grant funding secured. We have lots to do right now. So that's been my message to Melissa as we put this year's together.
So before, we're going to go look at each request kind of goal by goal. But before we get into that, I just kind of wanted to summarize some of the big picture. So throughout throughout the goals, we have a number of FTEs proposed, and this is just the general fund or internal service fund. FTEs. So we have 11 new FTEs proposed for fiscal 25. So that would bring the total for the general fund and internal service funds from, let's see, I think from 120 and some change employees to 131. The total cost would be about 1.2 million. So we want to make sure, the FTEs are always the most controversial and challenging topic because it's a recurring cost. When it's a full-time employee that stays with the organization. In addition, we're working on the reorg, and it's very likely that process will identify new positions that are needed. We're thinking at this point about 6 to 8. So that would bring the total numbers. So the total approved FTEs in the FY24 budget are 170.4. So that all of these all together, we also have 2 proposed for enterprise funds, would bring the total staffing to 191 employees.
Question about that. The reorganizations process study, whatever, is going to take a while. And is that really this fiscal year you're thinking that? Because I mean, it would be, especially since we don't know what they're going to be, but by the time we get that done and we figure out, okay, we're going to try and create or hire these positions, is that really going to happen this fiscal year?
It's a great question. I wish. We'll see. The reorg, I think, will have a good picture by mid-April. So it's kind of a 3-stage process. We've got reorg first, then we've got classifications and job descriptions, and then we have compensation after that. We have to get step 1 done before we move on to that compensation piece. I know everybody's like, hurry, hurry, hurry on compensation. And I've told you all the story on where we are with that and how we got there. We did discuss the potential of just coming back with a supplemental appropriation later. But I think with this one, we're really just going to have to see how it plays out, because if we get it in April and we do our best to prepare for it right now, it might be something we can get into the final general fund budget when we come to the table and second meeting in May and the first meeting in June to pass it.
Yeah, I
It's a
just wonder
possibility.
how we would put them in the budget if we don't know what they are.
Well, and they're not, right now, we're just kind of bringing to your attention that there might be an ask beyond 11.
Okay.
And so, it might be that we get it nailed down before the budget process. If we do, that would be a very clear, we would come to you and have that be a clear decision point with amounts. At this point, we can't do that.
Another point I want to add before we get to the next slide, because Melissa will talk about it. As I look at this number, I started to compare to other places. We're going to talk about some other municipalities and their workloads and what they're organizations look like. But also looking internally too, we just had a meeting with the school district and their FTE count, I went back to that slideshow, is 195 FTEs to serve about, what is it, 22 to 2,500-ish students. And then we've got, even under this proposal, 191 to serve 8,500 citizens 24 hours a day. So I think we're tracking in the right direction to get an appropriate staff built.
Actually, it's about 1,235 students.
So moving on to the next slide, as John just mentioned, we have not a lot of staff serving a lot of people. So this is just a quick, I went in and either looked at the audited financial statements or the budget, wherever they had their FTEs listed for a few communities. There aren't a lot of communities like Sitka in the state because we are a consolidated city and borough. We have here Wrangell and Juneau, which are consolidated city and borough. Ketchikan, they're a pretty discrete area. They're a separate city and borough. Excuse me. So this is combined. But I think, and this is with the added 13 employees that we have resource proposals for. So Sitka has 45.7, or each employee is responsible for 45.7 citizens. If you look at Juneau, they're down at 25. Ketchikan is close to 40 and Wrangell is around 31 employees. So, that's where Sitka stands. And I think some of the successes that we mentioned in the first slide are really, it's something that staff feel. Managing $78 million is a burden across the organization. Even adding new programs like Parks and Rec, just getting that off the ground. I don't know how many weeks, John and Amy and myself spent getting that program up and running. So there's a lot going on. And I think some of this next information here, and this is a survey that's underway now internally. And we have a significant number of employees who agree or strongly disagree that we have adequate staffing for our workload. We have a number of employees who are serious or who have seriously considered leaving CBS employment. And then getting to the comp study, which is we're working toward. There's about 43% who feel they aren't fairly paid. I think one of our other challenges is that across the board, staffing has become a huge challenge. And so I think I made a comment to John earlier today that it's like, if we have 27 positions vacant, it's like we almost need to be staffed up that much so that we, actually have enough staff to keep up, which is not what we're proposing. But it's when we're staffed as leanly as we are, when we have vacancies, it's really challenging and it makes people more likely to leave. So that's the FTE portion. In addition, I think the most significant change in the level of service that we're presenting, we've already discussed, and that would be to absorb the school building maintenance and operations. We're estimating, and we don't have a full RP for the full expense. We have the staffing in here, but we're estimating that will be about $640,000. And then as I mentioned,
One question there. So the maintenance taking over their operations, we would take those people under the city's wing, correct?
Correct.
So the argument could be made that, okay, we're moving it from the schools, which are really the city. And so it's a, you know, gonna be about the same, or maybe one or two people different than the school has now. So we could say that they're not really new employees or new positions. They're just moved over from the schools to here, which is part of the,
I see what you mean.
when we're trying to justify this, I think that's a point we need to make.
And then I just wanted to point out some of those areas that are, you know, there's good things going, but changes that have kind of put more of a burden on the organization. And we've got the sustainability efforts going. That's been a significant lift, particularly on our planning department. This airport project has been, you know, a very significant effort by a lot of people across the organization, Parks and Rec. I guess I put sustainability twice there, so.
It's really important.
Yeah. You know, the push for federal funding, you know, we said we were going to do that, and we're doing a really good job, and it's making a lot of work for us. In my world, we've got well, not just my world, but, you know, looking at our new lease with the airport and all of the rules that go along with that, that's new for us. The GASB, that's the one that's in my world, causing a lot of extra work there. You know, even something like the marijuana tax, I think we think, oh, it's a great source of revenue. It also is more work to do. And then, you know, we've got the subsidy programs, the procurement, you know, we're still finding a way with procurement to really, we see, I think almost every day we're catching things, and we know without a doubt that we've got a lot of savings and efficiencies happening there. We don't have a good number for you. We're trying to work on how to actually capture that. Again, our capital projects are fairly minimal, but the total request this year, which is all of these requests together, the total, in some cases, there might be revenue coming in or something offsetting it, but the total is 4.9 million. That does include the capital that's in here as well, which would be funded using the public infrastructure sinking fund. So some of the challenges as we're looking toward fiscal 25 is just sales tax growth. Part of what has been driving our sales tax growth is inflation. So as that lowers, just getting a good projection for you, that there always seems to be something making it challenging. But we have that. Tourism right now, at least for the next year, is looking to be pretty similar to what it was this last year. While general inflation has started to cool with capital projects, we're still seeing really big increases. And we're really trying to work to make sure that we have really good numbers when we come to the assembly, so we don't have to come back. So we can give you a full picture on the cost of our capital projects. As we mentioned, hiring and retention of staff, the cost of living, which is also related to hiring and retention of staff. The state is still kind of backing off on a lot of their funding that we've traditionally relied on, particularly for education. We talked about that at the last meeting. And then some of the unfunded mandates that we continue to have to exempt property tax. That's growing every year. Our property tax revenue, despite values increasing, has been contracting a bit in some cases year to year. And then we're limited on what other sources of revenue we have. So we rely really heavily on sales tax. And as we saw with COVID, you know, when there was a significant impact to travel and visitors, that had a really big impact.
Want to add to the hiring and retention of staff on this slide, and I don't have the exact year in front of me, but I just got back from Southeast Conference way too late last night, but we got one of the economic presentations there. Melani gives a presentation every year. It's great. We all look forward to it. And the outlook for the state right now is a rapidly declining population, which is making things much more challenging in the hiring and retention world. So it's not necessarily unique to Sitka. It's hitting the rest of the state, but you know, they showed the graph of the ups and downs of the population, and Alaska's population for this year, the loss was so big, we're now below the, it was either 2006 or 2009 levels. You know, we had the big bump there, and now people are leaving the state in pretty big numbers. And it's because there are better opportunities in other places. And we need to find a way to make Alaska more competitive. And that'll lead into my whole compensation study again, and the cost of living issue. But just something to keep in mind as we bring these things forward.
So again, all of the resource proposals are sorted by the strategic goal. So we've got our five different buckets, and our first one is goal 1, which is quality of life, and that is to preserve the quality of life and affordability for all Sitkans. So under this one, we have 2 requests. One is for an FTE, that is the tourism manager. And the focus of this one is to provide the resources necessary to adequately manage tourism while making sure that other critical initiatives, particularly in the planning realm, have enough resources dedicated to them. And if you have questions or want to look, the resource proposals are all in the order that we're going through. The second one is a patient loader for the fire department, and that is it's to help ensure that the patient is safe and also reduces risk of staff injury.
The tourism manager, are you thinking that, I always forget what we're calling it now, but basically the head tax money is going to cover some or all of that?
Likely between the head tax money and the bed tax, since it would be focused on not just cruise tourism,
Yeah.
but individual, just visitors in general here. I also would like to point out, I'm sorry if I interrupted, if you had another question.
No, that's fine.
That's not the salary for the tourism manager. I just want to make that very clear. The way we budget for a salaried position is it's essentially our best estimate on what the base salary looks like based on the market conditions, and then a percentage added on for the benefits and health insurance. And I don't know what the exact percentage is, but we plan on a family plan for whoever. So we basically budget for the most expensive plan that a person could select if they came in here, and it can come down from there.
Yeah, and it includes, because we have to pay 22% PERS, which helps fund the prior liabilities. So it's much higher there. We're also looking at, for a family plan with our projected increase for this year, that adds about $50,000 on to each employee with a family plan. So the costs are going up significantly.
So I just have a question. So I read through the proposal, and can you explain where this person is in the flow chart of who they report to, who they're responsible to?
I have thoughts, and I'm happy to talk about them. I think we'll get a more firm answer in the once the reorg is finished. But my general guess is that it's going to probably fall in the planning and community development department and report there. And that may mean some shifting of some other things that report to that position. But generally, I think tourism kind of sits in the planning world as we're talking about our future plans around tourism. No, and I don't want to put Amy on the spot, but if you want to come up, you can. And that, we have, as you can see, a lot of the staff here to answer all the questions on there. Yeah, it's going to be a management position. If you look at Juno's position or Ketchikan's position, I envision this being a person who will go to C-Trade conferences instead of me going to C-Trade conferences, talking with the industry, with the guidance from the assembly and from me. And then if we start things up like a TVMP and have contractors working in those roles for us, that position would be the one that manages all those contracts for tourism management here, but not a marketing person at all.
I foresee this being a lightning rod position, in particular, we're going to hear about this. So I would look forward to a very clearly defined role for this position so that everyone understands exactly where we're headed with this and who they're reporting to, even temporarily before the reorganization, so that, we can explain it to them as well. Because, I mean, tourism obviously is the hot button issue of the time. And so if we're going to be putting a manager in place, we need to understand exactly what we're talking about doing. And the impact on the citizens, so to speak. So I would look forward to a little more information about this position so that it can make more sense to everybody.
Things like, are they gonna manage the closures downtown? I mean, are they gonna, what exactly? And then also a clear picture of how we're paying for it, where, what, if somebody walks up to me and says, why are we hiring a tourism manager? We get too damn many tourists. And say, well, they're being paid for by the tourists, would make a big difference.
Yeah, it's a little in line with the tourism task force. They haven't discussed this as a whole yet, but individual members has kind of thought about this direction. And if the group does turn into a full commission, a point person would be beneficial for all of that. So we might be seeing a suggestion coming forward from the task force along these lines.
If I could go to the second one just for a second. So I kind of was under the impression we were going to talk about people, not equipment and stuff here so much. It seems, I assume that's for the remount for the ambulance to put another.
That one's later. The remount's coming later. This
know.
one's a different piece.
So this is another striker loader for one of the other rigs. Is that right, Dave? Oh, okay. One fit? I bought another of those. So.
So I'm generally from the kind of where we're leaving this, and I'll just kind of summarize as we go through each slide and make sure that I'm on the same page as the assembly. Both of these items you would want to see in our initial draft of the budget. Is there anyone?
I'd be very curious to know if this is going to be enough, though, whether just a single tourism manager is going to be enough, or whether we need to talk about, other people that we need. So I'd be very, I know you're going to do your study, but in the short term, coming forward, like, what are we doing with it, right? Like, the planning department seems quite busy with this sort of thing. So do they need more people? I guess that's something for looking forward in this one. So putting a manager in place is great. Managing, might be worthwhile to see about some seasonal employee.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. And that's one of the options. I can just say from my experience with the other communities, they typically have one tourism manager, and it's a lot of contract work underneath that manager. So again, we'll see what the reorg study says, and we'll see if we can, depending on where we go with the contracted services we have now, that might be a decision point that comes up very soon on whether or not it's going to be internal or a contracted service.
And our second goal is communication, improve communications and strengthen relationships within the community and organization. We have one request under this goal that is for police body cameras, with a goal of improving transparency and providing better documentation of activity. This is one that's come up a number of times over the years, and we've got a proposal in front of you today.
I have a question about this, if I may. So I doubt that the cameras alone is what this request would end up looking like. There would need to be some or group of people that are reviewing these and I'm sure we're gonna have plenty of FOIAs on this sort of thing. So, and process, where's the cost on that coming from? Where's that housed? How are we planning to do that? Are FTEs needed?
We've looked at a couple different options, and Chief is here too. I'll mention that as well, but we've looked at a few providers. One of them in this cost estimate includes the redaction services and the needed, the review of the video and storage of videos, those sort of things. And that would be an easy solution for us to just take on with that contract service. And then you can go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And there's one where we get the video, we store it on hard drives and do that ourselves. I'm leaning more towards and it's a big name contractor who does this for a lot of other communities, and they offer that redaction service with it. But right now, we're just looking at bringing on the service and potentially looking at the contractor to provide that to us, try to keep some work off of Sarah's desk as well.
So would this go out to RFB, or do you have some people in mind?
RFP or RFQ, we've got, I think, was it 2 or 3 that have already provided quotes? We've had 2 that provided quotes.
All right, so we will leave this one in. Our third goal, sustainability. We don't have anything new this year. Doesn't mean nothing is happening here. We've got a lot going on, but there's not a specific new resource that's being requested under this goal this year. This is by far our biggest, so I'm sorry about the small font here, but we'll just go through them briefly. Sure.
Is it okay if I just ask Ron to come up now? Because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions on this one as we move along.
Welcome up.
And so to back up, I think the reason we see such a big list here is this is goal 4 infrastructure. This has been a lot of effort going into this recently. We also have the total request is 3.6 million. In some cases, we have available funds. So for vehicles, we have sinking funds, things like that. So the actual total cost would be of new money would be 3.1 million. So the first item is to lift some of our heating and units at Harrigan Centennial Hall, the UV plant, the library. That's to make sure that those assets last as long as they should last. So I think that was something we saw with the Blatchley heat pumps. They weren't lifted properly. This is just making sure that all of ours are. The next one we've mentioned a couple times, we have the $640,000 to bring the school district or school building maintenance into the city. The next one is a vibratory compactor for an existing streets grader, which should help improve how long the grading on our gravel roads will last. So hopefully that will make less work for our streets crew so they can focus on other areas. The next one is to install fiber optic cable between a number of city buildings. And that's really the focus to ensure that we have reliable connections and can work as efficiently as we need to. So you don't click on an Excel sheet and have to wait 5 minutes and go do something else when you have a lot of tourists in town. And we did look into other options with our existing contractor. And while for 1 year, it would be less expensive, by the time you hit 2 years, you're already over the cost to install the infrastructure ourselves. We also have two more. We have 120,000 for replacement of a core switch stack. And then, sorry, that's the virtual server hosts, and then the core switch stack is 75,000. Those are just key IT equipment to make sure that we are safe and reliable. Our next one is replacing a tire changer and balancing machine. This is really to make sure that tires are installed as efficiently as possible and that they last as long as possible. We have $350,000 for roof repair for the city state building. This is a coating that would be applied to the existing roof, so it's not a complete redo, but it should extend the life of that roof by up to 15 years. Right now, it sounds like there's a number of buckets in that building because
Is-
the
Is the state kicking in any?
right now, we have the full cost, but we always try to split the maintenance. Something like this would very likely be a 50-50 split, but to be safe, we have the full cost listed here.
Have we talked to the state about this?
Yeah, so we've started to engage. The existing agreement that we have, the state is liable for 2/3 of any maintenance costs that come about the building. So that's something we would pursue, understanding that their budgeting process can take a while and it doesn't necessarily match up with ours. That's why we budgeted the full amount so that we could get it done, make sure that we stop any further damage, and then try to get funding back from them in the future.
Well, the reason I'm asking is their track record is not the greatest in that building.
Right.
I mean, I've heard about it a number of times where they refuse to, chip in. So,
I agree. I've heard the same things.
Yeah, I concur. In my first year here, I had a few run-ins on this, on the city-state building agreement, and they had actually made some attempts to pull us in under their maintenance program, and we said, absolutely not. We stuck to the original agreement that's been in place since the 70s, but this being such a high risk, the full amount is budgeted in there. We hope we can get some relief from the state on the building since we do share the building. But as was mentioned before, any heavy rain, I encourage you to walk over to the police department and look at the number of buckets that are in the hallway and dispatch catching all the water that's fallen from the ceiling.
I mean, again, that's been I honestly will be surprised if the state kicks in any significant amount. And the only thing we have in there is this police department, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the police department.
So, and what's our agreement? How much of the maintenance are they supposed to pick up?
2/3.
Yeah, here we are at 100%.
And there was a recent project where a number of windows were replaced and they did step up there. Regardless, whether they reimburse us or not, which we'll certainly be aiming for, we have to spend it. We have to have the full appropriation. But we can certainly identify a piece of that funding is coming from a source other than the general fund. So we can prepare the budget that way.
I mean, I realize that water's coming in, but it strikes me that we might be well served to start storing up that money and getting the police department out of that building. Because this has been an ongoing thing ever. And to me, we'd be well served to, break out of that.
Absolutely. I know it's, I want to make sure I don't say something I shouldn't, but it's not fully developed yet, but I'm sure you've heard of the state's exploratory work in the library at the Sheldon Jackson campus and their intent to potentially move the courthouse over there. I don't know where the funding is for that. I think it's just still in the planning phases right now. I did have a discussion with some of our representatives these last few days about this very issue. And I did throw out that if the state were to vacate that building, that would also be an opportunity for us to look into just rehabbing that facility completely and making that our new police department and even some other office spaces. But we'll need to see what direction the state goes with the courthouse.
So the next item we have is road brining equipment. So this would allow us to pre-treat our roads to prevent ice and snow accumulation, which will make it safer and also easier for staff to clear roads. This is estimated to cost $90,000. And it's similar to what DOT uses on the state roads in Sitka now.
So we don't have a system like this currently. This would be a new. We just use sand at the moment, sand and plows.
Correct, yeah, for de-icing and for pre-treatment of the driving surfaces, we just use solid chemical. This is more efficient. It should actually drop the use of that down. Better application.
The next item is $350,000 to really focus on road striping and repairs. So this would be contracting out this service to kind of get more done than what our small streets crew can do. It'll ensure that existing potholes that are more complicated to fix can get fixed properly, and so that the patches will hold. The next item is the remount of an older ambulance. This is an ambulance that rolled over, I believe, in 2007. So it was replaced in 2007. The remount would bring the fleet to 3 full-size ambulances and then the UTV. And just to note, many of our central garage assets have a sinking fund. This one, as a rollover item, does not have a sinking fund, so the full 262 would be needed.
So is this also eligible for tourism money? I mean, I think, if you do has there been a study of what our community would need without tourists in the summertime? So I know when I went through on our orientation tour, asking whether or not they had enough ambulances, I think that's a question that we might want to have a good answer for.
We have a very recent cost allocation study, the cost of general governmental services based on tourists. So there's a loose link there. This is one I'd be very, very cautious about before we jump right in with tourist dollars for, but it's something that can be explored. Something that's very important to point out, and I'll apologize, I didn't even realize this until this morning. I always assume when a vehicle comes in, another one's going out. And as Melissa said, this is a rollover vehicle, so this is actually an increase to the fleet size. So it does make me a little nervous. So I would actually hope that there's another source of funding that can cover something like this, because with it being a rollover and a remount, at the end of the day, it is still an older vehicle and might require some more maintenance. So something to consider.
A couple of points there. One, unlike other assets that we take care of the tourists with, we charge them a lot when we pick them up. So it's not, if you look in the big budget and you look at how much money we bring in with the ambulances, sorry, this is what I do. And it's probably one of the few city services that not only pays for itself, but actually puts money back into the general fund. I think I bought this ambulance with code blue money. I'm not positive as which one, but and so the actual, I can tell you that a remount is essentially a new ambulance. Part of the reason it's so expensive, it's a whole new chassis, and they go through the box and check it and everything. And I was just at the factory last week, so getting the ambulance redone. So, yeah, unfortunately, if we had done this 7, 8 years ago, it would have been $100,000 less. So anyway.
If we brine the roads, do we have to remount our ambulances faster?
Know if I'm qualified to answer that question, I'm sorry.
Well, I would hope by brining the roads is less salt and less corrosion, so we wouldn't have to remount the ambulances.
Yeah.
as
And we
much,
have
but-
fewer accidents, so we
Correct.
don't, we need less trips for the ambulance.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have a number of kind of standard vehicle replacements. So we have a police cruiser, a water department vehicle, an electric department vehicle, and a streets department vehicle. These are all pretty standard, with the exception that normally when a vehicle has reached the end of its useful life, and these ones all meet the criteria, they've become high maintenance, they're over 100,000 or 100,000 miles or 15 years. Generally, the sinking fund is enough to cover the cost, but the costs have increased so much. And plus, we are going when we can to electric vehicles, and that is adding cost to the vehicle. So you can see here that, you know, the total cost of, for example, the PD Cruiser is 102,000. We have 41-ish in the sinking fund, so we'll need another 61. We'll also say that there is a comfortable contingency built in here, because we don't want to have to keep coming back and pestering the assembly with requests. You know, if it comes under, which is great, then the overage will just go into the sinking fund for the new vehicle.
Are we changing the formula for how much we're putting in the sinking fund now?
Yes, we increased it last year and started to play catch up, and we'll be doing that again. Central Garage just got me some very recent quotes to help me update that. So I didn't mention, but as the team went through these, we kind of identified the assets that we felt were the highest priority, medium priority, and lower priority. If we didn't think we need them, we didn't recommend them. So they're not on the list here. So all of these top ones were listed as high. The kind of middle yellow was medium. They aren't ranked within that. And then the bottom ones are the lower priority. And really that's in terms of, you know, that filter was really what's buying down more risk or improving efficiency. So for our medium assets, we have a box plow, which will help improve snow and ice management. And that's all I can say about that. Ron can answer any other questions on that. And then repairing portions of the Whale Park boardwalk that were damaged, I believe, by trees falling in a storm. So those are the medium, and the reason they're medium is, you know, we can keep going without them. There's a portion of the boardwalk at Whale Park that's been closed for a while. We'd like to open it. We don't have to open it. The next one is a 5-yard dump truck. And this is one that it's on here. It could wait another year, but it is an asset that has a long lead time. If we wait a year, it will not be in the lower yellow part. It would be a higher priority. But it's one that would be nice to get ordered now so that we have it when we need it. A V plow for the road grader, so that will improve functionality of road graders. And storage containers for grounds maintenance chemicals. And those are Connex containers with roll-up doors to store chemicals and equipment. Again, this is one we can live without, but it would improve efficiency for our grounds team. Redoing the landscape at the entrance to this building. This is one that was identified as a priority by the Tree and Landscape Committee. And then getting some professional tools for central garage. Again, these are nice to haves, but we can't operate without them. So any questions?
Can you tell me a little bit more about what lifting an HVAC unit is?
Yeah, so with the Blatchley heat pump issue that happened, I believe a couple of years back now, one of the problems that was identified, or one of the root causes, was that the units were placed on the ground, and the manufacturer, through, I guess, trial and error, had realized that that's probably not the best way to mount them. It basically exposing them to elements on the ground, more water. It was causing them to ice up. Debris gets caught under them, things like that. When we did replace the 6 units at Blatchley, one of the main components of that project was to provide those pedestals, and those units seem to be performing well. These are the same units, by the way. They're same manufacturer, and so same design type, and so they want to make sure that we can make sure that they last as long as possible.
Any other questions on goal 4 items?
Well, I was just going to speak to the last item. I think you can qualify that one as part of your retention program too, to be honest with you. I mean, having the right tools to work with encourages people to stick around a little bit better. So, and it also, speaks to an investment in our staff. So I would encourage that one to be perhaps a higher priority.
And I'll just mention that if we are faced with as John says, a checkbook that doesn't balance when we get everything put together, the ones lower on the list would probably be ones we would first consider eliminating.
And if there's some additional money, would more go into a sinking fund, or if there's like an in-between spot where they kind of stay in this priority, but we could put more towards that 5-yard dump truck? Is that part of your kind of strategy?
I think at this point, we know we have such a need for infrastructure. If we have a surplus, we're not going to, we've kind of gone through and identified the needs that we feel we need for this year. And what would happen with any surplus is it would go into that public infrastructure sinking fund so that we can dedicate that in the future. So I think the more of a surplus we have, the better.
Yeah, so would we like to take a break? Okay, see you back here in 10.
Yeah. What? This proposal came from.
All right, we're all seated. Let's get moving.
So now we are on to goal 5, service. So CBS is recognized as being a great place to work and an excellent service provider to the community. Here we have total request of 936,000, a net of 916, because there are some savings in here. So the first one is my request. That's for an additional accountant for the finance department. And that's really, right now we're staffed thinly enough that when we have vacancies, it makes it very challenging to keep up with the work. The next one, the next request is for 4 firefighter EMTs. So this is 4 new FTEs, and it's needed to avoid delays in medical care and fire responses. I think just the pace of things for the fire department has really been increasing in recent years.
Well, if I may, there's also, I mean, volunteers are not as heavy as they used to be. I mean, I know I'm not running much anymore. So sorry. But we've been spoiled for a lot of years by the fact that we don't pay our responders, not really. And I'm assuming, Dave, we're talking about running 2 engineers on a shift or something? Yep. Not you, you're old.
Better looking Dave.
Yeah, right now with the, we got a new last. So that every ambulance, fire truck that left the building for the first call for service would have a firefighter or an EMT to help man or run that call. So currently we have engineers going out in the middle of the night by themselves. Last month we had them go out on a CPR, and the engineer was on scene for over 5 minutes doing CPR, and there was no other help arriving for them. And so weren't able to get the electricity to them that we need because they can't operate the AED and do compressions.
Yeah.
And so it's to kind of fill that. During the administrators survey that happened last year, I think it was, the jobs safety. So the engineers are out there by themselves. And so this would give another set of eyes on scene and just kind of help with managing those calls for service.
Well, I can tell you, this has been coming for a long time. I've seen it, and I can tell you that this is all across the state. We normally used to say, we'd have well over 100 volunteers, and I don't know what we're at right now, and it's not the same level. I mean, it's really, I don't know if people realize how much time it takes to become an AMT3 or an AMT, and it's a lot of time. And we have lives. And so you can't.
And another advantage would be that this person would help with the paperwork, so that the volunteers that come in the middle of the night aren't there for an extra 30, 45 minutes to an hour doing the paperwork. This person would be able to do that. The volunteer could go home, get sleep to go to their normal day job that they do.
It's unfortunately it's the way fire service is going all over the country. We just don't have the level of volunteers and the training anymore.
I think last year this was a 3-person request. What's happened to make it a 4-person request this year?
I didn't recall it being a 3-person last year, but the 4 is so that we'd have the round the clock coverage for the week, as long as everybody's able to come in not sick or out injured or on vacation. This would allow us to have that extra body on 24/7 along with the engineers.
All right, our next item is centralized permitting software. So this would be a capital project. And this would improve, it would house all of the city's permitting kind of under one roof. It would improve the efficiency and consistency for hopefully both staff and the community.
I want to jump in on this one to kind of explain my vision. If you look at our website, you know, there's a button there that says pay bills. I want to have another button that says get a permit, because we get a lot of confusion from citizens. They don't know where they need to go and what permit they need. It could be a busking permit. Actually, I don't even know if we have that yet, but it could be something from busking to a building permit or a utility connection permit. And I know a lot of folks hit the Public Works office and they get that you got to go to the utility department or, you know, water for this one, or you need to go over to buildings for this one. With a new centralized system, it's I need a permit. What kind of permit do I need? And the system will distribute it to the appropriate offices so it can get the attention it needs.
How will goal 5's permitting process be with the tourist manager position's permit review process of the last statement of his job code?
I'm not sure how I understand what the,
This permitting aspect for just permitting, and then when we went over in goal 1 of the tourist management position, the very end of his job description was permit review. And so then I was just wondering,
Was it on
no, it was on the
resource one?
the one that I saw from Tim's, the very last sentence said the permits for tourism will go through the tourism manager. And so I just wondered if goal number 5's permitting thing would cover the tourist permits that the tourist manager position is gonna have the final say so over. I didn't understand.
I don't have a clear answer for you. I'll have to look into that one more as well. Yeah, if you have it, I'm not sure what permits they look at now.
Hi, thank you, Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. I submitted both of those items, the tourism manager as well as the software permitting. So happy to provide a little more information on there. We have several different types of permits that are needed in relation to tourism. So some of those live here at Harrigan, some live in Public Works / Parks and Recreation. Some of those live with the police department. So job duties, part of what we do need is, you know, we need a tourism manager who has sort of a holistic understanding of all those different permits and what's needed. Right now, that person is largely me, and I don't have anyone to delegate that work to. The permitting software would be kind of a tech solution to help that tourism manager and to help the public as well, to have a clear process of, you know, I just know that I'm trying to start a walking tour business. And I don't know what all the different permits I might need are. The tourism manager is there to help support that process and to answer those questions. And the permitting software will help the facilitation of taking in those applications, routing them to the different departments that might need to be involved in those and getting them out the door. So the tourism manager is, you know, definitely not the only position that would interact with this software. But their job, if the job is created, would definitely be significantly more efficient if we had this software.
I know we kind of keep talking about the tourism permitting here, but would this also be permitting for like a building permit, foundation permit, utility? Okay. And could they apply online, or would it just route them to the correct department to?
So it depends on the software solution that we end up going with. And we can kind of build out what people can do online versus what they might need to submit in person. And it, you know, what's likely is that it would probably be a hybrid of those two because, you know, we still need full set plans to be, you know,
Yeah,
to be available for review and stuff. So you could at least probably initiate your application and hopefully pay for your permit fees and all that stuff through the software. And you could also see where it is in the queue, if it's pending review from other departments, else is hanging out there. It would also be a centralized place for us to provide comments back of, here's the things that you might still be missing, or, oh, you did provide us a site plan, but it's lacking these details. It's all in one centralized place as opposed to, you know, 10 different emails, sort of thing. So our hope is that we would streamline that process as much as possible, but there's probably some elements that people would still need to be able to like submit in person,
yeah.
physical
Okay.
copies.
All right, thank you.
And would this be a one-time $100,000 or would there be an ongoing?
No, this
service?
would be, yeah, it'd be an ongoing, most, I mean, most of these programs are on a subscription basis, so.
And also keeping in mind, if you look at it in a full business case perspective, the efficiencies that we hope to gain from it is more capacity with the existing staff, not chasing things around and sitting in an email queue or, you know, walking from department to department. It could be some efficiencies gained there.
Just making me curious from, you know, when the city dropped the boat tax, you know, they'd get $100,000 from that revenue a year, but it would cost $100,000 to get it. So they just quit the boat tax. So just kind of curious as to that effort of, you know, what it costs to get that money and just trying to catch up.
Okay, our next item, which these are both items that Ron can answer any questions on. So we have 2 security gates proposed, one at our Granite Creek lease site and one at the Public Service Center. So the idea of these is to improve safety and security in general, and then oversight at the Granite Creek lease site. Make sure that people who are there should be there and that material is not leaving when it shouldn't be.
I want to jump in on this because these are both very important to me from a safety perspective, and I think there's a lot of risk there. There's a difference between public buildings and workspaces, and I was actually surprised coming here, seeing that it's open access to central garage and heavy equipment, and we've got a lot of expensive materials that are just at risk and open. And at Granite Creek, we've had multiple incidents of locks being cut and material coming and going without any accountability on it. So I don't want to see anybody get hurt at any of these facilities, and I'd really like to see CVS retain ownership of the citizens' property and make sure it's used appropriately.
Where is the Granite Creek gate gonna go in at?
So I'm trying to picture this in my mind. There is an existing gate there. I don't know if you've seen it.
I'm
going
thinking of
out.
3 separate gates along that.
It's the first one. So
Okay, so the one right after, well,
it's right at
Seacon's pit now or McGraw's old pit.
right. Yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty much right there. It's
Okay.
I think it's at the end of the pavement, at the end of the asphalt. I can't remember if the asphalt goes further than that, but it is right before what is it, lease lots 2 and 3, the new Seacon pit.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
right before that.
All right, yeah, I know the gate you're talking about then. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good idea. You know, there are old rock pits back there that, you know, could be troublesome if people want to go back there and root around and
Yeah.
potentially cause trouble. So having that secure is probably a good idea.
I think security of rock pits is great. I think security of schools is more important. I'd like to think at some point, some security vestibules that don't look like security vestibules for our educational facilities is, in my mind, of higher priority. I think $100,000 for a grate is a good thing, but $100,000 for secured schools is even better.
We are working on an RFP right now for electric key card systems to control access to the schools and improve that safety level there. So that one will be coming as well.
And then our last item is a new FTE, a circulation services manager. This one is offset by temporary wages. So this one, while the cost is 105,000 approximately, the temp wage budget would be reduced by 20,000.
What is that position?
Jess?
Hi, I'm Jess Yermia, the public librarian here. So the position is, it's a circulation librarian services position. Currently, we have 6 part-time workers that cover the front desk. And I'm looking to have 1 full-time position that would help kind of link the ability for everybody to implement our policies and procedures along with our best practices. So it's kind of hard right now when we have a lot of disjointed workers at the front facing part of the library.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any questions on anything that we've gone over tonight? I haven't heard any strong objections to anything that's been presented, so we'll be starting our draft budget with these items in there, assuming we're reasonably balanced. All right, so now with this feedback, we're going to get working on getting that general fund budget and the internal service funds, because the internal service funds impact all of the other budgets. Those ones have to happen first. So we'll be getting that together. The goal is to get you a draft budget to look at by the end of this month. And you'll actually have a full month to look at it since I'm going to be taking a little bit of a vacation in March. But our next meeting to go over the general fund, we have another meeting on the 29th to talk about any resource proposals and rates for the enterprise funds. But the next general, that's the 29th. And then the next general fund budget meeting, I believe, is April 4th. And that's it.
Any other questions from the assembly? Okay. So now we're on item B, which looks very much like item A. It says there is a little note here. This is a catch-all item the mayor likes to have on the budget agendas in case there are general budget items the assembly would like to discuss. So that's where we're on now. Anything that was missed in the budget?
I was hoping to use this time to discuss a little bit more about if we wanted to pull out any of these pieces that are previously maybe considered general fund, but maybe could be used for head tax or CPV funds. And we kind of discussed it a little bit before with, that tourism management role and perhaps something else here with, that lift for the UTV, which is primarily at the boat dock and other things. Were there other pieces there that we'd want to kind of highlight as potential for CPV or head tax?
Do you think a potential fire or an EMT position is there any justification for using CPV funds for one of those salaries maybe?
I think that unless we have a specific position dedicated and we track time, and we do, our staff does when they can, they do, if it's very much related to cruise ships, we do track it. And, you know, if it's a firefighter tracking, then the CPV fund reimburses the general fund. So we still see that expense going out, but then there's revenue offsetting. We will be, for the tourism manager, you know, we'll see where the comfort level is with CPV versus visitor enhancement. The loader, I think, you know, very likely, you know, knowing that it is for the UTV, which is dedicated to serve, it's actually out there at the cruise ship terminal. That one, I think we can do that. So what that will be is it will be an expense from the general fund, but we'll have it offset by revenue coming in from CPV fund. So we'll definitely be looking to maximize that across the board.
And something else to add to that, as you remember, we passed last year an ordinance that updated the process for the CPV fund balance. So by the second meeting in March, we'll come back to the assembly with what that fund balance looks like. And after we do that analysis, these could be considered in what that fund balance will look like as you all decide whether we want to go out for public proposals on further uses of that fund, if there is any balance left. And then, of course, we have to go through the whole stage of talking to the industry and their input on it as well.
I think, you know, it doesn't sound like we have a good solid data to fall back on in terms of how much of an impact above what our population would require for services in the police, in the fire department, or EMT services. I do know our demographics are shifting older, so I think there's going to be an increase to that. When I've talked with Craig, he's indicated that seems to be the case. But I think that would be an interesting piece of information to get, so that when it comes time to talk to people about how to fund some of these extra services that are being required in our community, that we'll have information to talk about what the impact of the extra visitors ends up being. I know the hospital is gathering information in terms of the increased visits and costs to them. So, you know, I think it would behoove us to put some effort into figuring out exactly what the impact on our services, both police and fire, are over and above what they would be without those people in town. So, or how they've changed in the last 10 years. I mean, just so that we could say, you know, then it's, I think, a simpler justification of the CPV to say this is something that's been changed in our community and is a result of what your visitors. So I think I'd like to see that going forward too. So.
Yeah, we could provide some more granularity. I don't know if anybody looked at the state of the city report that I gave to the chamber a few weeks ago. There was a slide in there about the number of emergency calls that came in, but that was just the one snapshot in time, and it showed how many emergency calls that were directly supporting a tourist, whether it was a cruise passenger or independent tourist. Those statistics were provided in there.
Any potential for the fiber optics and kind of us working up a better system for internal data due to slow internet, mainly in the summertime? Any potential there you think in exploring for CPV or the tax money?
Yes, it's for the same reasons as the emergency vehicles. We'll have to do the smell test on it. But it's definitely impacting our internal services with, and not just with the city's services, just internet service in general in the city. There are some agencies out there that are interested in coming here to help resolve that, but that is an opportunity for us if we make it right.
That's helpful to know, at this point, because we're seeing some fairly big numbers for a lot of these areas. So if there's potentials for them to kind of track elsewhere than just general fund, that helps me kind of process this a little better. Mhm. One more question. I was able to tally to 10 FTEs. I think I might be missing one. There was 4 in maintenance with taking on schools, 4 in fire, 1 in planning for that tourism management, and 1 in the library. Who am I missing? Accountant. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Melissa.
don't forget
Yeah,
the
don't forget
accountant.
that. Just, it was so obvious that I glazed over it. Thank you.
Any other? This is our opportunity to give a little guidance or a little information or more questions about the budget or how we could, I think it was pretty comprehensive. Personally, I think you guys have done a pretty good job. Looks, the departments have clearly come forward with some good ideas. I'll just put in a plug again for the tools at the central garage being a higher priority. And, as a mechanics, that's an important piece of their life. So, I think it's, as you're talking about how hard it is to keep and retain people, I think you want, these are investments in our people. So I will encourage that again.
Tim? I guess I do kind of want to talk about not necessarily what was just presented tonight, but maybe the overall budget process this year and how I'm feeling with what's going on within the community and just our economy in general. As you all know, I'm a fisherman, and I got to say our industry right now, we're in trouble. We're on the ropes. We haven't seen a market downturn like this since the early 2000s. I'm already hearing it from a lot of people, tradesmen, and just other suppliers in the industry that this is the lowest amount of business they've seen in a winter. And that's concerning because that means less commerce going on within our community. And, we're going to see less sales tax and less spending going on. So I'm just concerned about the future. And I don't think this is a short downturn. I think we're going to be in this for 2 to 3 years. So that's one of our pillars of our economy. So as I'm seeing more FTEs proposed here, I'm a little hesitant because how I see one of our pillars, what we're going through, not to mention a lawsuit that's still pending, and with more lawsuits and complaints coming. So I'm hesitant because of that. I'm also hesitant because one of our other big economic sectors is kind of under attack. And if we have both of our kind of key pillars to our economy kind of cut out at the knees, I'm really scared about going with such a bigger expense and reoccurring expenses with FTEs. I mean, I'm not saying no to more, and I know that we probably need to have some in certain sectors. I'm just nervous because I am seeing, well, as soon as I opened up this slideshow today, I saw storm clouds, and I just went, man, that is how I feel right now as I see storm clouds brewing with our economy in this town. So I'm not saying really no to anything yet. I'm just very hesitant to start spending big. Yeah, I just want to put that out there and make those comments because I think it does need to be something considered with what we're looking for in our not too distant future.
Just want to respond to that. I agree. We've always budgeted very conservatively on the revenue side when we do this. And I'm not saying don't worry, because I think there is a legitimate worry here. We will keep a very close eye on that. As Melissa already said, I keep asking, is the checkbook going to balance when we put all this together? If it doesn't, I'm coming back here and we'll start making those tough decisions. So this is step one to see if we can get there. having this guidance now helps us see, you know, if we got to start trimming in certain areas and what that means if we trim in some of those areas. But I share those same economic concerns as you do, and we will take that into account as we piece together the revenue side of this equation as well.
Thank you for putting together this packet as you did with all the resource proposals. It was helpful to see and got most of my questions answered just by reading through the packet, and also putting in the resource proposals that didn't make the cut to really see the full extent of your editing process before it gets to this table.
I think we're all good. End of item B. We're now persons to be heard for public participation on any item on or off the agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes per individual. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none. We are at adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.